Disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction inspired by themes of love, infidelity, and emotional drama. Any resemblance to actual events, people, or places is purely coincidental. It is intended solely for entertainment purposes and does not promote or encourage infidelity, dishonesty, or any form of harmful behavior. Listener discretion is advised, as the story contains mature emotional themes that may not be suitable for all audiences. The story begins with heavy rain pounding against the windows of Emily's small suburban home. She's home alone, curled up with a book and a cup of coffee, when she hears an urgent knock at the door. Opening it, she finds Daniel, her husband's longtime friend, drenched and shivering. He explains that his car broke down nearby and he just needed a place to wait until the rain lets up. Despite knowing she should probably call her husband first, Emily feels a sense of pity, and perhaps something else she can't quite explain, and lets him inside. Daniel's presence changes the quiet, rainy afternoon into something charged. They talk in the living room, their conversation starting innocently but quickly becoming personal. Emily notices how Daniel's eyes linger on her, how he remembers details about her from years past. The thunder outside seems to echo the growing tension inside. She tries to ignore the subtle electricity between them, telling herself she's simply being hospitable. But deep down, she knows this encounter is stirring emotions she thought were long gone. As the rain continued to pound outside, Emily tried to focus on making Daniel comfortable. She brought him a towel and offered to make tea, but her hands trembled slightly as she set the cup down in front of him. Daniel thanked her with a soft smile, one that lingered longer than it should have. His gaze held hers, and for a moment, it felt like the rest of the world had faded away, leaving only the two of them in the warm, dimly lit living room. Their conversation drifted from light topics, old memories, shared acquaintances, to more intimate territory. Daniel asked about her life, her happiness, and whether she ever felt lonely when her husband was away on business trips. The way he asked, with quiet sincerity, made her chest tighten. Emily tried to brush it off with casual answers, but her voice betrayed a vulnerability she rarely showed. The air between them thickened with an unspoken understanding. Each time their hands brushed as she passed him something, a spark shot through her. She caught herself studying the lines of his face, the way his damp hair fell across his forehead, and the warmth in his voice when he spoke her name. A particularly loud clap of thunder made her jump, and Daniel instinctively reached out, his hand briefly covering hers. The touch was brief but electric, enough to leave her skin tingling. They didn't speak of it, but both knew something had shifted. What was supposed to be a simple act of kindness had become something more dangerous, something neither of them could easily step away from now. The rain showed no sign of letting up, drumming relentlessly against the windows. Emily sat across from Daniel at the small kitchen table, her tea long gone cold. She wasn't even sure how they got here, from catching up on old times to peeling back layers she had kept hidden for years. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on the table, his voice low and steady. "You deserve more than just existing in your own home," he said. His words hit her harder than she expected. She wanted to protest, to defend her marriage, but instead, her lips parted and she admitted softly, "Sometimes I feel invisible." The silence that followed was heavy, not uncomfortable, but charged with something that felt dangerous. Daniel didn't pity her. He looked at her as if he truly saw her, perhaps more clearly than anyone had in a long time. He confessed his own struggles, feeling out of place, never quite belonging anywhere. The mutual vulnerability pulled them closer, like gravity neither could resist. It was a strange and intoxicating intimacy. The boundaries of my neighbor's son and a married woman were blurring with every word they shared. At one point, their hands found each other in the middle of the table, fingers intertwining naturally, as if they'd done it 100 times before. Emily knew she should pull away, remind herself who she was and what she stood to lose. But in that moment, with the storm outside and the warmth between them, she didn't want to. She didn't even think about tomorrow. Because right then, it felt like the world had narrowed to just two people, a kitchen table, and a truth they could no longer pretend wasn't there. The thunder cracked loud enough to make the lights flicker, but Emily barely noticed. Inside, a different kind of storm was brewing, one far more dangerous than the one rattling the windows. Daniel's hand was still in hers, his thumb brushing slowly against her skin. It was such a small gesture, yet it sent a shiver racing down her spine. She could hear her own heartbeat, feel the warmth rising to her cheeks. It wasn't just the touch. It was everything that had been building all evening. The stolen glances, the shared confessions, the unspoken longing. "I shouldn't be here this long," Daniel murmured, though he made no move to leave. His voice was low, almost reluctant, as if he feared that stepping away would break whatever fragile connection they had just uncovered. Emily swallowed, unsure if her next words would be a lifeline or an invitation. "Maybe you should," she whispered back. It was a dangerous sentence, one she knew could change everything. A sudden gust rattled the glass, and for a moment, the power went out completely. They were left in darkness, save for the faint glow from the street lamp outside. In that dim light, Daniel's face looked different, softer, but more intense. She could see the hesitation in his eyes, the same question she was asking herself. How far is too far? The air between them was electric. It felt as if one wrong or perhaps one right move would tip them over the edge. And yet, Emily wasn't sure she wanted to be saved from the fall. The storm outside roared, but inside, silence pressed in around them, thick, charged, and irreversible. Daniel hadn't moved, and neither had Emily. They were both caught in that narrow space between decision and action, where every second stretched into an eternity. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. Emily, just her name, but the way he said it felt like a confession. She should have stepped back. She should have broken the moment with a joke or a change of subject. But instead, she found herself leaning in ever so slightly, as if her body had already made the choice her mind was still wrestling with. Daniel's hand moved to her face, his fingertips grazing her cheek, trailing toward her jawline. The warmth of his skin was intoxicating, his touch deliberate but trembling. He was close now, close enough that she could feel the soft rhythm of his breath against her lips. One heartbeat, two, and then the distance between them disappeared. The kiss wasn't rushed. It was slow, searching, an unspoken answer to every look, every touch, every almost that had happened before this moment. For a brief, dangerous span of time, the world outside ceased to exist. When they pulled apart, their foreheads still resting together, neither spoke. They didn't need to. The truth was clear in the way their hands still lingered, in the way neither could quite meet the other's eyes. They had crossed the line, and there was no going back. The rain had stopped by morning, but inside Emily's chest, the storm was only just beginning. She woke with the memory of his touch still fresh, her lips tingling as if the kiss had happened seconds ago. At first, she let herself replay it, the warmth, the gentleness, the way it had felt like falling into something inevitable. But then the weight of reality crashed in. Her husband, Daniel's friendship with him, the life she had built, and the quiet vow she had just shattered. Every ordinary sound that morning, the coffee maker sputtering, the hum of the refrigerator, felt sharp, as though the world was mocking her for thinking she could keep last night tucked away as a secret. She told herself she wouldn't see Daniel again, that it had been a moment of weakness born from loneliness and a stormy night. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. She caught sight of herself in the mirror while brushing her hair. She didn't look like someone who had done something wrong. That scared her even more, because the danger wasn't only in what had happened, it was in the fact that she wanted it to happen again. By the time she stepped outside, the streets were washed clean by the rain, but her conscience felt anything but clear. And when she saw Daniel across the road, leaning casually against his truck as if nothing had changed, her heart gave her the answer she'd been trying to avoid. It had changed. Everything. Emily tried to avoid him. She truly did. For days, she busied herself with chores, rearranging kitchen shelves, and even volunteering for extra shifts at work. Anything to keep her mind and body occupied so she wouldn't think about the man across the street. But temptation has a cruel way of finding cracks in even the strongest walls. One evening, just as the sun was dipping below the rooftops and painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, there was a knock at her door. She froze, the sound reverberating through her chest. She didn't have to open it to know who it was. When she finally did, Daniel stood there, hair slightly messy from the wind, eyes searching hers with a question she didn't dare answer out loud. He didn't speak, not at first. He simply held out a small paper bag. Inside was a still warm slice of her favorite pie from the bakery downtown. "It's just pie," he said softly, but the way he said it made her pulse race. Emily could have closed the door then. She could have thanked him politely and gone back to the safety of her living room. Instead, she stepped aside. The moment the door shut behind them, the air shifted. This wasn't a stormy night fueled by vulnerability. This was a choice. When he kissed her this time, there was no hesitation, no pretense of innocence. She didn't think about her husband or the life she was risking. She thought only of the way Daniel's hands felt against her skin, the way her name sounded in his voice. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew this was the moment she could never undo, the point from which there was no turning back. And she didn't want to turn back. It didn't take long for the walls of their secret to start crumbling. Emily had always thought she was careful, locking doors, erasing messages, avoiding unnecessary glances in public. But secrets have a way of slipping through the smallest cracks, and it only took one. One afternoon, as she was folding laundry in the bedroom, her husband, Mark, walked in holding her phone. His face was pale, his jaw tight. "Who's Daniel?" he asked, his voice low and trembling. Not with sadness, but with something far more dangerous. Emily's heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. She opened her mouth, searching for an explanation, but none came. The truth was heavy, stuck in her throat like a stone. Mark didn't shout. He didn't throw things or curse. He simply set the phone down on the bed, turned, and left the room. The silence he left behind was more terrifying than any argument could have been. That night, Emily watched from her window as Daniel's porch light flickered on. She wanted to run to him, to explain, to hold him, but she didn't. She couldn't. Over the next few days, the distance between them became unbearable. Daniel texted less. He stopped stopping by. And Mark? He moved through the house like a ghost, speaking only when necessary. Emily realized too late that what had started as an escape from loneliness had led her into a prison of her own making. The pie was gone. The rain had passed. But the damage, oh, the damage was here to stay. 44.